In 2016, a huge trove of leaked documents revealed how the law firm Mossack Fonseca helped the world's rich and powerful evade the taxman and hide their wealth. The scandal became known as the Panama Papers, and it ensnared many of the world's wealthiest people, from billionaires to politicians to sports stars.
From politicians to celebrities and criminals, the world's wealthy have always found ways to hide their money, including in Panama, where billions of dollars had been stashed away in a scheme to evade taxes. In April 2016, investigative journalists reported that Panamanian law firm Mossack Fonseca had set up thousands of offshore companies for that purpose. Journalists reviewed 11.5 million leaked documents, 214,000 offshore companies, and 14,000 customers. The trail quickly led investigators to Deutsche Bank. Several of its staff allegedly helped customers transfer funds, some from suspected criminal activities, to Panama. Other banks have also been implicated. Among the bold-faced names linked to the scandal, Britain's then Prime Minister David Cameron, Argentinian soccer star Lionel Messi, and Iceland's President Sigmundur David Gunnlaugsson, who had to resign after news of his involvement broke. Mossack Fonseca also had Chinese customers, but their names weren't released. Millions in fines have been paid. But the law firm's founders, Panamanian citizens Jürgen Mossack and Ramon Fonseca, have been spared despite international arrest warrants against them. They remain untouched because tax evasion wasn't a punishable crime in Panama until after the infamous papers were released.
The amount of money laundered every year is estimated at 2 to 5% of global GDP. 2% of global GDP is roughly equal to the combined GDP of Turkey, the Philippines, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan. Over $500 billion flows out of developing countries each year. Much of this money flows into Western economies via complex offshore structures. In 1952, the future Kenyan president Jomo Kenyatta is imprisoned by the British colonial authorities. He becomes a symbol of Kenya's struggle for independence.
Jomo Kenyatta is viewed as Kenya's father of independence, so to speak. He used to go by the name Johnston Kamau. He used to be a water meter reader in the colonial government's municipal council. He was also fairly well-spoken. I believe that's part of the reason why he was selected from amongst the political intelligentsia at the time.
Upon his release from detention, the near-penniless Kenyatta becomes a close friend of the last British governor of Kenya, Malcolm MacDonald. In 1963, Kenyatta is elected as the first Prime Minister and later President of independent Kenya, while Malcolm MacDonald becomes the British High Commissioner. The government and civil service of the new country is comprised primarily of what the British called loyalists. Post-independence, Britain retains a number of military sites in Kenya. Today, Britain trains 6 infantry battalions in Kenya every year. 60 years after independence, the Kenyatta family is one of the wealthiest in Kenya.
The Kenyatta family have vast investments in land across the country, right down to the coast, all the way up to the what was called the White Highlands. They own the biggest milk company in Kenya. They own one of Kenya's biggest banks. They have a chain of hotels. They're building a sub-city right now, just right outside the bounds of Nairobi city. There's always been an open question about how Jomo Kenyatta was able to become such a rich person, just 1 or 2 years after becoming president. His salary at the time doesn't match the kind of wealth that he has. There have been memoirs written by people from his administration that say that he essentially would engage in land grabs of very, very prime pieces of land owned by members of the settler community, etc.
A declassified CIA report noted that funds provided by foreign governments in order to pay for the redistribution of land from colonial settlers to landless Kenyans had allegedly been used by the Kenyattas and their associates to buy land for themselves. Today, the Kenyatta family are the biggest landowners in Kenya, holding over 500,000 acres of prime land across the country, while many former Kenyan freedom fighters and their families who fought specifically for the return of their land received nothing. Jomo Kenyatta passed away in 1978. His son, Uhuru Kenyatta, followed his father into politics.
The country's president, Uhuru Kenyatta, was among the world's rich who were named this week in the Pandora Papers.
According to the Pandora Papers, Kenya's president, Uhuru Kenyatta, and 6 members of his family have been linked to 13 offshore companies.
And what was revealed is that the family had invested in offshore structures. For, if you're including the extended family, as early as the mid-70s. Uhuru Kenyatta was listed as a beneficiary of a trust that, so to speak, belonged to his mother upon her death.
Uhuru Kenyatta claimed to be an advocate of transparency, and cracking down on corruption was a central theme of his term in office.
This dragon, this beast called corruption, is an animal that we intend to slay.
President Uhuru Kenyatta welcomed the leakage of the Pandora Papers, saying the publication of the papers will go a very long way in enhancing the financial transparency and openness required in the country and around the globe.
In Kenya, 2/3 of the population live in poverty, on less than $3.20 per day. 70% of Kenyan families are chronically vulnerable due to poor nutrition, food insecurity, and preventable diseases. Kenyan law requires the president to provide a list of financial interests to the Ministry of Finance each year.
What we own, what we have, is open to the public, and we declare every year. And I've always said, if there is an instance where somebody can say that what we have done or obtained has not been legitimate, say so. We are ready to face any court.
He said that he's made his wealth declarations, but we've never seen them. Secondly, families of politically exposed persons don't have to declare their wealth. Between the year that he got in 2013 and today, those have been very good years for the Kenyatta's wealth. There is this feeling that the Kenyattas, as well as other political elite, they have become fabulously wealthy at a time when Kenya is suffering from the worst levels of corruption that it has seen in years. How it's been described is that there's been one rule for the elite, especially the elite that's connected to power, and another for everybody else. So that's what the perception is. I think I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
The Kenyattas are what are known as politically exposed persons, or PEPs. A politically exposed person is someone who holds a public function and as a result presents a higher risk of being involved in bribery or corruption.
Politically exposed persons, in theory, have access or potential access to public funds within particular countries, and our investigations have come up with lots of evidence that unfortunately there are PEPs who have been stealing public funds and moving it into places like the UK, either to hide it, to clean it, or to spend it. So PEPs are incredibly significant when it comes to the money laundering picture, and that's why professionals in the regulated sector, in the private sector, are supposed to do enhanced due diligence whenever they have a client who is a politically exposed person. Unfortunately, there are multiple cases that we have found where that clearly hasn't happened. I could think of one former political official who was accused of embezzling a lot of money. This was splashed all over the internet. Within the 5 years following that, this person was able to open several UK bank accounts, took out a few mortgages on UK houses, opened a UK company.
Can you share who that person was?
Because of slap suits in the UK, which I'm sure you're really aware of. We're very aware of them, unfortunately. I have to literally libel check everything I say, learn it like a script, and then say it, so I can't.
Even if that is already in the public domain?
Yeah. It's a big issue. Journalists like yourselves, NGOs like us, are often targeted by very expensive lawyers in London, unfortunately, who take on dubious clients and basically pursue NGOs, pursue journalists for daring to mention the corrupt dealings of these people.
The Kenyattas are not the only developing world political dynasty who have amassed wealth and land beyond their known sources of income. Since coming to power after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the Aliyev family of Azerbaijan have accumulated a vast fortune and business empire. Azerbaijan is a major crude oil and natural gas producer. Fossil fuels are so abundant that surface oil deposits have burnt for centuries. The UK is the largest foreign investor in Azerbaijan, making up over half of all foreign investment.
The Aliyev family is the richest family in Azerbaijan. They came to power in 1993 when Heydar Aliyev, a former KGB general and Secretary General of Azerbaijan. Secretary General of Azerbaijan Soviet Republic orchestrated a coup.
In 1993, Heydar Aliyev seized power in a coup. Shortly before Heydar Aliyev's death, his son, Ilham Aliyev, took over as president and has remained in power ever since. BP arrived in Azerbaijan in 1992, and after the coup, signed a secret deal with the new president. Today, BP is the largest foreign oil company in Azerbaijan.
The political opposition has always said that British Petroleum was responsible for the state coup. They brought Heydar Aliyev to power. I remember in 1993, during that difficult electoral and coup period, the British private security companies were doing something in Azerbaijan. Maybe they came to protect someone high-level officials of British Petroleum, or maybe they came to help protect members of the Aliyev family. We don't know. Nobody knows what is in this contract between British Petroleum and Aliyev. It's like biggest state secret in Azerbaijan.
On its website, BP calls this contract the contract for the new century. The Aliyev family have vast business interests in Azerbaijan.
Who is the owner of 5 biggest commercial banks in Azerbaijan? It's the Aliyev family. Who is the owner of the biggest private transportation company? It's the Aliyev family. Who is the owner of the biggest 5-star hotel networks in Azerbaijan? Again, it's the Aliyev family. They privatized the state's biggest banks, and after they made themselves owner of these banks, they start using these banks to launder money.
Heads of state and other major figures have deposited vast assets offshore.
According to a review of nearly 12 million files from around the world. It's the latest report by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists.
The Pandora Papers expose a London property empire worth nearly $700 million amassed by the ruling family of Azerbaijan.
So one of the properties that we looked at was on Conduit Street in central London. This property was bought in 2009 by a company owned by one of the associates of the presidency of Azerbaijan. And then this property was basically sold shortly after that to the daughter, who was 19 at the time, Arzu Aliyeva. And eventually it was sold to the Crown Estate, which is, owned by Queen Elizabeth II.
The Aliyevs made a profit of £31 million.
There was another property in Mayfair, Maddox Street, which was transferred to Heydar Aliyev, who was the 11-year-old son of the president of Azerbaijan. So, overnight, the tenants started paying their rent to an 11-year-old boy. In Kensington, there was a cluster of properties in one development called Thornwood Gardens. Over here in Holborn, there was a hotel.
When the Italian newspaper La Repubblica asked Ilham Aliyev about the Pandora Papers revelations, he replied, "Some forces in the West try to use these kind of insinuations or half-truths in order to discredit the image of Azerbaijan and undermine Azerbaijan's position. They want to accuse us. They want to subordinate us. They want to impose their will on us. And I say, no. I will defend Azerbaijan, its sovereignty, its independence, its choice until the end of my life. And all these kind of dirty stories mean nothing to me and to the people of Azerbaijan."
In the Pandora Papers, we saw dozens of politicians and world leaders, current and former world leaders, with wealth offshore. Offshore service providers are supposed to conduct enhanced due diligence and really scrutinize the sources of wealth of the politically connected people that they provide services to.
The Pandora Papers revealed that offshore service providers did not conduct sufficient due diligence on their politically exposed clients.
There was some light Googling, running names through risk databases and things like that. The people conducting these checks are really doing checks to be seen to be doing checks.
At the moment, it's very hard to pursue large banks and big firms for money laundering offences because we do not have a failure to prevent money laundering offence within UK law, which Transparency International very much believes we should have. Our research identified 582 UK individuals and firms who were involved in major money laundering cases. We have people who will turn a blind eye to anything they may discover, proceed anyway, and those who maybe don't do enhanced due diligence when they should. You will find individuals and firms that will actually deliberately go out to try and get the services of those who are potentially involved in corruption and criminality because it's big business, it's big money. There are 84,000 UK properties that are owned anonymously. Now, of course, some of those will be owned with the legitimate money, but it's quite possible that a lot will be owned with suspicious funds.
Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan, is an unusual place. It is not just the prevalence of stray cats that make it unusual, because even more prevalent than cats are police and security officials. There is a security official on every street, on every corner, even underneath bridges. Ornate parks of marble and sandstone are scattered throughout the city. Only in the suburbs and on the edges of Baku is the fairy tale confronted by reality.
In 2005, Azerbaijan signed the UN Convention Against Corruption. One of the requirements of that treaty was to implement financial declaration for all state officials. Parliament ratified that treaty. Yet, until today, 17 years later, nobody is declaring their wealth. The first journalist who exposed the huge corruption in the government was killed at the front door of his house. After that, we saw that all journalists who spoke about stolen assets, they have a problem. They are put in jail. Their lives become extremely difficult. They are prosecuted, they are blackmailed with private family issues.
The National Crime Agency, or NCA, is tasked with investigating money laundering in the UK.
I think there are reasonable grounds for the NCA to investigate assets owned by or linked to the Aliyev family in the UK. It's not always entirely clear how the presidential family has made their wealth. Some of that money, at least, came through money laundering systems, laundromats, which are known to have funneled illicit money out of Azerbaijan.
We wanted to ask the NCA why they had not opened an investigation on the Aliyev family's assets in the UK. The NCA did not agree to speak to us.
When I was in Azerbaijan, the British Embassy occasionally invited us for breakfast with ambassador and other British officials. They would tell us that they were afraid that if we did a strong investigation, we would put ourselves in trouble. They never give us any support to investigate corruption. British politicians, including British politicians in the Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly, tried to wash the negative image of Aliyev. You know who is the biggest lobbyist in Azerbaijan from the UK? It's the son of the Queen, Prince Andrew, Epstein's friend. He is also a friend of Aliyev, a very good friend.
Every 5 years, the people of Azerbaijan elect a president. And every 5 years since 1993, that president's name has been Mr. Aliyev. In the 2008 election, Mr. Aliyev received 89% of the vote. In 2013, he received 84.5%, and in 2018, he received 86% of the vote. During the 2018 election, Emin Huseynov worked for an NGO investigating electoral violations.
We observed the elections and discovered irregularities. After that, the government closed down our NGO. They confiscated all our equipment. They put most of us in jail. I decided to escape. The police in Azerbaijan were looking for me, as if I was the #1 terrorist in the country. They put my photo at the entrance of all metro stations. The taxi drivers and the bus drivers had my photo. I changed my appearance. I grew a beard and dyed my hair blonde. Secret agents were waiting in front of the Swiss embassy. They asked the guard, "Have you checked him?" And the guard replied, "This is not the guy you are looking for. The guy is a foreigner." Switzerland protected me. And after 10 months, the head of the Swiss Ministry of Foreign Affairs came to Azerbaijan, and he was able to take me with him to Switzerland. After that, President Aliyev illegally cancelled my passport and he stripped me of my citizenship.
According to the Wealth Report, London is the wealth capital of the world, beating New York to the top spot. London is the favoured playground of the world's politically exposed oligarchs and their family members. The Sharif family of Pakistan, the Aliyevs of Azerbaijan, the Kenyatas of Kenya, and many other current and former politically connected families who acquired vast fortunes beyond their known sources of income own billions of pounds of prime London property. London boasts the greatest diversity of international property investors, with people from 45 countries owning properties in London. British dependent jurisdictions continue to offer financial secrecy and tax evasion services. 84,000 properties in the UK are owned anonymously. The UK government has made repeated promises to crack down on dirty money, but on each occasion, the government has failed to implement the promised legislation or watered down the legislation so as to make it ineffective. Britain remains the capital of libel tourism, where the wealthy come to attempt to silence their critics. London continues to be a safe haven for the global elite that have fallen out of favour in their home countries. Pakistan under Imran Khan attempted for years to engage with Britain to repatriate laundered money. Many other developing countries have done the same, without success. We approached numerous UK government bodies and ministers for this documentary. Not one agreed to speak to us. The FATF, the Intergovernmental Money Laundering and Terrorist Financing Watchdog, headquartered in Paris, indicated in its first review after the ousting of Imran Khan that Pakistan had met all of the compliance recommendations to be removed from the FATF grey list.